Mr. Carter.
I'm pleased to speak and follow this debate, the Crown Accounts this afternoon. And I want to pick up on some of the comments from my colleague, the Honourable David Cunliffe, about GST, and I address to the Minister some questions about the government's proposals for GST and ask what exactly will this do to advance the rate of jobs in New Zealand? What would an increase in GST do to improve economic growth, the economic recovery, or indeed the Crown's financial balance? Because the indications strongly thus far from the government are that for every dollar they take in from the GST increase, they're going to compensate New Zealanders for that increase. And if one did believe that, and difficult though it may be, it begs the question of why would you bother with introducing a tax increase which is certainly not judged by our GST bus tour of the country by any means popular, absolutely the contrary. And I think the answer to that question is simply this. This is payback time for the government in terms of cutting the top tax rate again. We saw in the rushed legislation prior to Christmas in 2008 where the increase in tax was for those of about 3%, got a third of the gains from that, and one suspects from the newspaper projections of a cut in the current top tax rate of 38 cents in the dollar to 33 cents in the dollar. Well, we know which end of town that's going to fall in. And I have to say, on behalf of my electorate, Christchurch Central, which while it has its leafy suburbs, is certainly not a wealthy electorate, where the impact will fall. The figures for my electorate show 76% of people earn less than $40,000 a year. 76%. They spend every dollar they get on the basics of life. They don't have discretionary income. They don't have overseas holidays. They don't have much capacity to save. So they are going to be whammied by an increase in GST effectively of 20%. And that's why they're concerned, and that's why they were turning out in large numbers in support of the bus tour that Labor recently took around the country. They know what that tax increase will mean for them and their families. And I wanted to ask the Minister this question. Already the OECD statistics show that in terms of consumption taxes, New Zealand has already the fifth highest rate of consumption tax in the GST. We don't have the highest rate itself at the current 12.5%, but we have absolutely no exemptions, virtually no exemptions. And so currently we have the fifth highest rate of consumption tax in the whole of the Western world. And where does the Minister want to take us to? Do we want to go to second or third in terms of the consumption tax, the GST? And what benefit will that bring to ordinary people? I wanted to just touch for a moment upon the financial review of Radio New Zealand. And during the course of the Commerce Committee hearing into Radio New Zealand's financial review, we were given a letter from the Broadcasting Minister, Jonathan Coleman, to the Radio New Zealand Board, in which he said that the Board needed to change its mindset.
Order. We're concentrating on the Finance and Expenditures Committee report, not Radio New Zealand. You'll have an opportunity later on to debate that one if you wish.
All right. Where I'm going on that issue is I think what's happened across the whole spectre of the Cabinet spend is the Minister of Finance has really monstered some of his ministers, and positions they've taken in the past are now absolutely contrary to where they're at today. In the case of that particular department, it had a charter introduced to the Parliament only last year which said that it would not go to commercial sponsorship of programs, and indeed that's now specifically what that Minister is proposing to that board, to that entity. So I think we're seeing that not just in Radio New Zealand but across the spectrum of government departments. We also see in the broadcasting portfolio the Broadcasting Minister suggesting to Television New Zealand it now needs to look at funding channels.
Order. I've said to the member, this is a debate on the Finance and Expenditures report, not on Radio New Zealand. Right. You'll have that opportunity later on, so I'll ask the member to come back. You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I pick up today also on comments from the Prime Minister in relation to literacy, funding of literacy, as funded through the Crown accounts and as reflected on in the financial statements of the government. And the suggestion was today that in fact the funding of literacy has been improving. Well, I know, again in my electorate, that the YMCA, which funds programs for literacy for the very worst off, for those who are at the bottom end, youths who come from... Thank you, Mr Chair.
I call Dr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Chair.